We're going to talk to you about the U.S. Produce market. What's happening in the U.S. is that growth for retailers in general is very hard to come by. So for a couple of years here, you saw that overall retail growth was what we call, moderate, but a lot of that was driven by inflation. The US retailers have had a very hard time truly growing volume and getting people to buy more. Last year there was no growth at all. This year we're tracking at about 1%. So what that means is that retailers are really starting to look at where is the growth at. And when you look at center store, so that's all the packaged goods, if you will, we've seen year over year declines. Whereas on the perishable side, and that includes anything from deli prepared meat, seafood, and bakery and produce, that's where the growth has been. So what we're seeing a lot of retailers do is starting to focus more and more on the perishable side in specific produce, because not all fresh is doing equally well. So when you look at growth rates, both dollars and pounds, it's really produce that is starting to emerge as a very strong player. So what we're seeing in produce in the US, it's a massive category, 63, 64 billion, and that's really only in the channels that an IRI and a Nielsen can measure. When you think about the farmers markets and everything bought directly at the farm, that's an even bigger market than that. For retailers, it's a very lucrative product as well. When the item is in the basket, when people are buying produce, the basket tends to be double as big. So that's why you're seeing a lot of retailers put more and more emphasis on produce. They're adding bigger departments, adding skilled labor. You have things now like produce butchers is what they're called. You see a lot of focus on organic and a lot of focus on health and wellness. So we'll be showing a lot of examples of that, because really that's what the study that Rick and I are talking about today is all about. It's called The Power of Produce, and we asked shoppers, we asked IRI and Nielsen provide us data with what is actually happening, and you'll see a lot of names up here because more than anything we believe it needs to be developed by the industry for the industry. So we have retailers, wholesalers, packers, suppliers. Rick runs a big fresh committee, and really that's where that research is coming from. So what we're going to look at today is really where in the US is growth coming from. Well, growth really comes from 4 different areas if you think about it. First of all, have people buy produce as often and eat it as often as possible. It's really that penetration piece. Driving trips. In the end of the day, we got to make sure that fruit bowl is stocked, the fridge is full, so we got to drive people to the store as often as possible. Focus on a basket size, so have people buy premium products and spend as much as they may possibly can spend, and really operational excellence. And that in the US is something that people are starting to focus on more and more, that when people are in the store to buy produce, they actually end up buying it because it looks good, it's in stock, etc. So starting off with that participation piece, the US for a long time was not like Europe. We bought fresh fruit and vegetables, but it's never been the same kind of focus that I'm used to coming from Holland. So what we're seeing though is that the household penetration is at 99.7. So finding that 0.3% that's not eating produce, there's no sense in putting effort into that. But what we found out through the survey is that when you look at the actual consumption frequency, there's a lot of people that only buy it 1 day a week or 1 to 3 days a week. So what we always say is focus on moving people to the right, because there's so many people that only eat it every couple of days. And that's really what the retail industry is focused on quite a bit. And we asked shoppers about, is that something that you're in the market for? Do you want to eat more fresh produce? And absolutely that is the case. 94% of shoppers said, I do want to include produce into my eating habits a lot more. And the big opportunities right now in the US are on the far side over there on your right in snacking and juicing. Those are really huge areas that are growing right now. But even the more traditional produce areas, lunch and dinner, we're seeing quite a bit of interest in having more fresh consumption in that as well. If you look at the generations, you see that there's a lot of interest from millennials, especially in that snacking and smoothies. So that's why you're seeing a lot of ready-made sort of packaging in the produce department. hardest thing, and that's true whether you are a retailer in Holland or a retailer in the US, is people are creatures of habit, right? And so in the end of the day, trying something new, there's a risk in there. Am I gonna actually like it? And when we asked shoppers about that, a ton of people said, yeah, I am a creature of habit, absolutely. I tend to buy the same fruits and vegetables again and again. However, 83% of US shoppers said, you know what, I would be willing to try something new if somebody were to advise me in whatever way that's possible. So shoppers very much welcome ideas, and I think that's a huge opportunity for our industry. Rick, if you could just share with you the kinds of things that we're seeing out in the US.
Right, so if we start thinking about the fact that the US retailers are trying not necessarily to bring more people to buy produce, but getting more people to buy...
Rick.
Oh, can they hear? Is it on? Okay, great. Okay, so the real thing that, because it's a 99.7 penetration, what the US retailers are trying to do is find other ways to get the consumer to put more in their basket, or find other occasions for them to buy it, or be able to communicate reasons why it should be on their radar. So we just wanted to use a couple pictures from some US retailers. On the left here, it's basically communicating that it's a healthy snack. So that consumer who wasn't necessarily maybe even in the produce department, could have been in another area of the store, and they're thinking of a healthy snack, they're now going to think of, perhaps I buy produce. The picture in the middle is an end cap right near the front, again promoting good choices made easy, because one of the great things about produce is we think it's a health and wellness alignment, which is a huge macro. And then you even see retailers in their ads. So in the ads you have the blueberries, you have the yogurt next to it, but of course they're trying to create the connection. So for a consumer that was going to buy the yogurt, perhaps they're now also going to buy the blueberries and use it together. We also think it's about cross-merchandising it. Put produce in other areas of the store. Give consumers the chance to buy produce where they might not have traditionally been thinking about it. So here we have a meat case where you have the kebabs, we have the stuffed potatoes. Here we have a mixed bag of chicken breasts. It's almost like a meal kit. And then of course the salad bar. And you know, it's all about communicating. In the one end cap over here, you have peppers that goes in with an Italian theme. In the middle, we have bananas right near the cereal aisle. And of course, we have a freestanding kind of make your own guacamole stand near the chips. You know, cut fruit and healthy snacking has become a huge trend in the US. It hits the convenience factor. So we're starting to see big sections of cut fruit, and they're not necessarily in the produce aisle. A lot of times these are over in the deli food service aisle, where customers are buying meals and they're looking for the snacks. Anna-Marie talked about the juicing and how important juicing has become as a way to increase consumption of produce. And then over to the right, you have like a chopped salad station or a juicing station where the customer can then buy produce outside of the produce department, hitting it on their radar.
Yeah, so this is what I talked about earlier. They call it a produce butcher. So people can actually grab a cabbage or grab their fruit. They go over to this station and it's made into the kind of product that they want. It's a very, very new sort of development in the US, but more and more retailers are playing around with it.
And then over to the left, I love, this one picture, it says you have to be 12 or under to purchase it, you know, which I think is a great way and a fun way to kind of let consumers start thinking of their kids. What am I doing for my children to make sure they're eating healthy? And again, more signage that is kind of geared for the child. This particular store had a kids table. Again, promoting one more reason why I could buy produce that I may not have thought of when I was shopping the produce aisle. And of course, the kid-focused merchandising continues in the packaging. So trying to communicate that on packaging has become very important. Consumers want to know more about their food. They're reading more of the packaging. So these are just several examples of where the packaging is geared towards that parent who's trying to make sure that they're feeding their children healthy choices.
Yeah, Rick and I always jokingly have the term carfeteria. because more and more parents are on the go, taking their kids everywhere. So this whole notion of snacking on the go is becoming so important. And if you look at the more traditional snack categories like candy and snacks, a lot of it is about the portability of the cups, easy to open with one hand, sharing. And so a lot of that more is that going on in produce as well, as produce is trying to become more of that traditional snacking occasion.
And then you got fast food and convenience stores and drug are all joining in this. So in the US, it's not unusual to go into a fast food chain and they'll have like snack boxes, or look at Starbucks serving a fruit cup. Here you're in a drugstore where you didn't traditionally think of fresh fruit and vegetables, and in a drugstore they have a whole end cap of cut fruit and cut veg for convenience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think traditionally we think of supermarkets as to for our export, but definitely in the US right now, produce is really in every channel possible. And why is that? It's really, and again, coming from Holland, it's sort of fun to me to observe all this, but the US has typically taken to supplements and vitamins to get their health on, if you will. But more and more Americans are starting to realize that there's that big connection between health and what you eat. So a lot of the produce has that, what we call the overall health halo. Everybody knows if you eat produce, that's good for you. But more and more Americans are starting to have very specific health issues that they're either trying to manage or prevent, and are tying that back to different produce. So things like balanced diet, healthy weight, getting my essential nutritions, getting energy out of it. And so what you're seeing in US stores is that it's not just about the eat produce, 5 a day kind of thing, but tying it back to very specific sort of things. Rick, you want to talk about this one?
You know, so you're seeing a lot of communication about the benefits of the product. So here you talk about, you know, the kale, spinach, and romaine, extra vitamin A. It's communicating the health benefit of it. Over here to the right, you know, a Buddha cleanse, the juice cleansing type products have become very popular. And look at all the different things that they're trying to drive. They're trying to, you know, improve your immune system, sleep peacefully, reboot your digestive system. Here's another one where it kind of talks about good source of potassium, and again, communicating the benefits. I often tell the story about, and I think this holistic health, in my opinion, is going to be growing in a huge frontier over the next 3 to 5 years. I'll go back 10 years ago, my son was diagnosed with colon cancer. And after being treated at Johns Hopkins for about 6 months with chemotherapy, and knock wood, successfully, he's doing well. And this was 10 years ago. And he was a young man, and I remember the head of oncology at Johns Hopkins slipped a paper over to him on, you do like an exit interview, so you're about to get on with your life and they want to give you all the, and he slips over this piece of paper and there's food products on the paper. And the doctor looks at him and says, I can't prescribe this to you, but please read this. Please pay attention to this. And so this whole idea that within our produce department, there are fruits and vegetables that can help prevent specific ailments, I think that you're going to see a huge growth in that, and that'll be a great opportunity to increase consumption.
Absolutely. So you're seeing a lot of, hey, potatoes have vitamin C too, so in case you're finding a cold, you don't have to just eat oranges. There is a lot of vitamin C in potatoes as well. So it's really interesting to see that. You see people tying back to retail dietitians that are in-store dietitians, providing tours, providing tips. In the meat department, you will see like, hey, ground turkey is a great, healthier substitute for ground beef. And so you see tips like this as well.
And the retailers are putting it right on the signage. So Kowalski's calls it an antioxidant mix. So they're actually just going after the specific health benefit of that particular package, which I think is outstanding. And then of course the dietitian tip.
And so another a big opportunity within the United States is talking about those health benefits, talking about the individual nutritional profile, talking about, hey, what might be some different preparation methods. A lot of us get stuck in a rut, again, that habit of buying the same stuff, making it the same way, then getting bored with it. So retailers there have done quite a bit as well in terms of what you see in store.
And so Lens Byerly's created a whole program around Nourish and trying to communicate to their customer a whole lifestyle change around fresh fruits and vegetables. Here you have technology working in the produce department. So they're using Fitbit, the app, as a way of being able to communicate. You can eat fruits and vegetables, track what you're eating, and be able to improve your benefits. And then I love this one. It says half makes you whole, which is an opportunity to say that if you fill half your plate with fruits and vegetables, it'll make you whole. And that's another communication that retailers are trying to, again, increase consumption by tying in with the whole health and wellness theme.
Absolutely, and some of these retailers are definitely not like your Whole Foods kind of retailer. The one in the middle, in fact, is Walmart. That's the military commissary. So this is becoming really, really big in the United States. You see, again, retail dietitians on making the same old potato, but in a different kind of way. Having fun with corn. Of course, the song is Born to Be Wild, Corn to Be Wild. Just having some fun with the category, and that's really what retailers are doing to help consumers increase consumption. So let's talk a little bit about the other component of driving growth, and that's really to get people in the store as often as possible, because we've all been there, done that. You open your refrigerator with the full intent to cook, and there's nothing in it. So for US retailers, it's very different than Holland, where people tend to shop every day, every other day. In the US, a lot of people only go to the store once a week, sometimes less. So as retailers, they're really, really focused on what we call driving trips to the store. So what you're seeing right now is that just over half of all trips are actually including produce. So there's huge opportunity for retailers to make sure that when people are in the store to buy that milk or buy the loaf of bread, that they buy produce as well. And that's really what a lot of the focus is on. And that starts really with getting people prepared before they go to the store. Now, just like as in Holland, all the retailers put out a little paper circular, but that is declining very, very rapidly. They're typically tucked in with newspapers. Newspaper circulation is way down in the US. So what you're seeing is a lot more focus on having promotional signage in the store, apps, websites, etc. And that's really the kinds of communications that are growing. The beauty of that, I think, as growers and packers and retailers, is that we have way more opportunity to educate shoppers rather than only showing price points alone. If you think about a printed piece, it's limited real estate. If you think about a website, you can link it to a grower, you can talk about the health benefits, you can do quick sales, you can do produce happy hours. So retailers are having really a lot of fun with this digital piece. But as Rick and I always talk about, at the end of the day, we put a lot of emphasis on price, but at the end of the day, what sells produce is the eyes. The eyes decide. It has to look good, and without it looking good, people will leave your store without buying anything. But there's another aspect to it looking good, and that's impulse. What we found out is as much as produce is a plant category, there's a lot of opportunity in the US for impulse as well. And that's really where that eye-catching display come in. When we ask people, you know, when you buy produce that you did not plan to buy, what got you, right? And it's all about the eye-catching displays, sometimes a great promotion. And Rick, I think you have some great examples of that.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the big takeaways we have is that by using the ad or an online presence, it's kind of the invite. And consumers look at the price and they decide where they're going to shop. US shoppers are now shopping at multiple locations. So if I have a great price, let's just say on peaches during the summer, I may pick your store to shop at. Once they walk in the door though, that ad and that price, you throw it all out the window. It all has to do with the display. It all has to look of the department. So if I go up to that peach display, and even though it was the best price in town, if the peaches are soft and there's fruit flies there, there's two things we learned from the consumer. One, they won't buy the product, but guess what else? they don't buy other products in the department. Their total basket goes down because they begin to judge the entire department based on that initial reaction of when they come into the store. So we took some pictures. You know, what we love about produce is all the great colors and the color breaks. So when it's executed very well, you really can make an impact on the consumer. Having managed many stores over the course of my career, I remember telling employees, you need to make the department look good. And the reason they needed to make it look good is because I was telling them they needed to make it look good, right? Now you can go to them with consumer information and say, the reason you want it to look good is that consumer's going to purchase more. You give that employee the understanding of what the benefit of keeping better store conditions are. And so again, you know, it's hot promotions are real eye-catching to the millennials. The millennials have less dollars to spend, so they're very interested in information and costs. So there's a lot of examples here of how to promote that. The other thing that the U.S. is fighting is this whole Amazon and HelloFresh, all these digital opportunities. Well, digitally you can't sample. So we think one of the things that brick and mortar stores can do in the U.S. is do a better job of sampling and give customers a choice. Personally, I wouldn't sample apples. I think most of my consumers know what an apple tastes like. Unless I was trying to prove that my quality was really high. I would be trying to sample some of the unique items that they may not have bought before, star fruit, and kiwi, and things of that nature, where you give them an example to buy something they wouldn't traditionally buy. And then, of course, the packaging, I think, you know, again, drives those millennials with information. So they may have heard of guava, but they don't know how to eat guava. So here's a great example of sign on that. And Abbe-Marie got this picture, which I think is great. This store basically created their own heat index for peppers, and then communicates all the different peppers that a consumer could buy, moving it from mild to very hot. And then over here you have the digital presence. So this is almost like having a TV in the department where you can change information as the consumer's in there.
See a gentleman taking a picture. I figured out, wait a second. So Rick talked about there's many different channels out in the US. It's kind of like Holland that way. You have massive stores, more and more you have smaller footprints, and of course online is coming on big now too. But the one channel that really dominates the produce purchase, that is supermarkets. So that is your Safeway, your Publix, so those very traditional supermarkets. But ones that are up and coming and to continue to grow is that limited assortment, as we call them, the Aldi's, the Lidl's. You see growth in supermarkets, but you also see growth in organic stores. So in other words, if you figured out produce can save and really drive you as a retailer, everybody else has figured that out. So there is enormous competition in produce in the US. And what's happening too is in Holland especially, we have always competed with markets, with farmers markets, with buying directly from the farm. That is very, very new in the US. So there's this whole fear about farmers markets and how as a traditional retailer you respond to that. But what we're seeing is that consumers like that browsing at a marketplace. So they're starting to pull dollars out of that traditional store as well. So definitely a lot of competition for that total marketing dollar. So what retailers are doing a lot is focusing on what I would call a premium basket, right? Trying to have people buy just a little bit more than they were planning to, or maybe buying something organic, biologisch, or anything like that. So what we're seeing is, first of all, huge growth in organic, and it's very much pushed by retailers as well as kind of an organic like for shoppers in general. So in the end of the day, it's still a fairly small market size. It's about 8% of all the produce sold in the US. But when you look at new dollars, organic represents 30% of all growth. So that is huge. And what we're seeing is both growth in dollars and in volume. So this is real growth, even though the segment is a little bit on the small side. More and more people are buying it, so household penetration is growing. People predict continued growth. 26% said they would buy more, and the vast majority said they would buy about the same. So a lot of retailers are using signage like this now, saying we have nearly 200 products in our produce department to keep people from buying organic produce within the store. Why do people in the U.S. buy organic? Well, first and foremost, it's kind of a shortcut to them for everything they want to avoid. The pesticides, the herbicides, long-term positive health effects is the second one, and then the notion of environment. So you see a lot of signage in store, Rick, really referring back to those reasons.
Right, and I go back to what Anna-Marie said before. One of the primary reasons that the retailers are trying to drive this organic purchase is it has a higher dollar ring. So if my pounds were to stay flat, but I could convert people to organic, at the end of the day, I'm going to make more money, right? And so they're definitely trying to resonate with the consumer. So they have organic, and what does that organic person think about? They're thinking about their health and they're thinking about the environment. So that sign kind of just almost hits the consumer right in the eye of here's some other values you have. I love the fact on the peeled carrots, it wasn't enough to say organic. They actually wrote on it free from. So they're trying to resonate with that consumer who's trying to say, I want organic because it doesn't have something that's bad for me. And then again, the overall responsibly grown. This whole idea of aligning with consumers' cultural and social values is very important to be able to grow that business.
Yeah, so when we shopped some Dutch stores yesterday, I saw a lot of this on package, but not so much on the store signage. So that's becoming really, really big in the US, where you see this enormous signage all throughout the produce department. Locally grown, we talked about that a little bit this morning, is becoming really, really big. And I think actually together with organic, local are going to be some of the biggest trends in produce. And as you can see here, when we kind of combined would you buy a regular, a local, or an organic, and put different price points on there, you see that Americans definitely have a great love for something that is grown locally, whereas the organic shopper is also very loyal to that organic price point. So I think they will grow hand in hand. Where organic isn't available, you'll see a lot of emphasis on local. And they're definitely two of the biggest trends in order in terms of growing dollars. So, what determines local? That's where it gets pretty funny. The first time we did this research in the US, as massive of a country that it is, it was the first 4. There were people that says as long as it's grown in the US, I consider it local. Really, people? I mean, in Holland I can see that, but in the US. But as we continue to do the research, it started to narrow and narrow and narrow. And now you see the 2 big buckets are either state or region. And what we're seeing is for the smaller states, like in the Northeast, it's the state. Bigger states like California, Texas, we actually are starting to see it become even smaller, with a lot of emphasis on hyper-localization as well, Rick.
So the U.S. consumer is absolutely obsessed over this idea of local. And we kind of look at it as this whole millennial group wants to know more about how their food was raised and grown. And I think the stat we often use is that about 100 years ago, 70 out of 100 U.S. citizens were connected to agriculture. And now, 100 years later, 1 out of 100 are connected to agriculture. So you have this huge piece of the population that doesn't know how food is raised or grown. And so the more you can communicate that you're doing something local and tell the story, so it's not just local, you can actually talk about the farmer, you can talk about how you're helping them economically and helping the local area economically. And so you're going to see a plethora in the U.S. of signage and ways to communicate local.
Absolutely. Value added, so that's everything that's cut or in meat. It would be pre-marinated, that kind of thing. Growing up in Holland, we've always really had the mixtures. We've had the cut fruit and the prepared vegetables. It's fairly new in the US and it's still up and coming, growing tremendously. So what we're seeing, just like organic, is it's really a small slice of total produce. But when you look at the growth, again, very high dollar numbers, very high volume numbers. So together with organic, again, value added is one of the biggest growth areas in the US. A lot of opportunity for continued growth. We're seeing more and more people buy it. We're seeing people buy more, and we're seeing more stores make more available. So it's a very 3-legged stool kind of growth. Why do people not buy value added in the US? Well, that's really interesting. First of all, price differential. There's a lot of people who say, you know what, I can cut that myself. I'm not willing to pay that much more. But you're also seeing a lot of issues that come back to the way Americans shop. They're not in the store every single day. So when I buy cut fruits and vegetables, they don't last as long as regular conventional fruit and vegetables. So this whole notion of shelf life is an issue. People having touched it, food safety is an issue, don't know how fresh it is. So this whole notion of connecting this value-added piece to how the U.S. consumer approaches the category is a big issue.
And this value-added piece in the U.S. is really a convenience. It's a matter of time versus the price. And I often tell the story, and you remember me telling this. I went into a store around Easter where they had asparagus on sale for $1.99 a pound. And so it was city and ice, it looked beautiful, and that's a pretty low price at $1.99 a pound. And just catty corner, they had a produce butcher that was simply chopping off the bottom of the asparagus stalk, wrapping it up and putting $5.99 a pound on it. And I watched consumer after consumer set down the $1.99, pay 3 times the amount, and go buy the ones that had a cut, because they saw it as an equation of convenience and helping their lifestyle. So we are educating our retailers to say this value added is a great opportunity to drive more dollars and also more usage. So you're seeing it throughout the produce departments in the U.S. now. The packaged goods, they've cut the cabbage for coleslaw, or they've cut the carrots or the peppers or the onions. You just continue to see opportunities for value added.
Yeah, so what you're starting to see in the US is really providing that optimal view. If you were in the market a year ago, all the labels would be turned with the price towards the front. More and more people are just really trying to bring out that beauty that vegetables bring, cut fresh in store, we did it for you. So really trying to overcome the barriers that the American shopper has for this product. Branding is actually something that is becoming really big in produce. For the longest time, in meat you saw branding, and in produce you saw not. Again, a big difference with the Netherlands. So we're seeing a big growth in branded produce as well as private label produce. And Americans like it because they equate it with quality, with consistency. Hey, I loved this particular orange, I'm going to buy it again because I believe that gives me a consistent eating experience. So I think big opportunity in case you're an exporter in building a brand in the US. So what we're seeing here is private labels like a Publix brand, and they're really trying to take advantage of that brand image that they have throughout the store. They have this premium look and in ice cream and everywhere else, and they're really driving a more like branded sort of look for that premium salad versus what would be more of an ordinary salad in the US, being that Caesar, and really explaining the organic brands.
And the cost on that's probably identical, but they're getting a higher retail for the premium one. And probably the product inside is, as a consumer, you wouldn't notice the difference. So that's a marketing tool. Here are other examples of the branding. So you're seeing the word Chiquita and Sunkist and Del Monte and Green Giant, or Boar's Head, which is a big deli brand in the US. So this whole branding has become very popular. The other great aspect about it is that in the US right now, traditionally, growers communicated with retailers, and retailers communicated with consumers. Well, as a grower, if I brand my product, I can begin to communicate directly to consumers. And we're starting to see that happen in the US.
Yeah, so these, for instance, are very big in the can aisle. And now they're starting to bring the brands that people are familiar with from the can aisle into the produce department. Other strategies that we're seeing work really, really well is, first of all, seasonal items. We heard Albert Heijn guy talk about that this morning. More and more people want produce available all throughout the year, regardless of the season. But there is starting to become more demand for eating the product when it's in season. There is recognition that it does tend to taste a little bit better when you buy it in season. 4 in 10 shoppers in the US are interested in that, and definitely growth in that area. Sustainably grown, fair wage, non-GMO, talked about that a lot as well. Again, these still tend to be fairly small categories, but I am convinced we're seeing it in meat with animal welfare. I'm convinced that this whole notion of doing good, fair wage, non-GMO is going to be very big in the US and going to be one of the major growth drivers. So you're seeing a lot of non-GMO call out, taste me, do good, connect with us, always non-GMO, in addition to the health call outs that we talked about earlier. Ethnic item selection, it used to be that you really had to go to the ethnic store to buy the ethnic produce. More and more traditional retailers are starting to realize, hey, this is something that we lose shoppers over. So what we're also seeing is that the retailers that are doing really, really well in produce actually have a bigger variety. They have up to 800 produce items in their departments versus about 400 or 500 in general. So again, if you have an oddball product, these days there's huge growth opportunity in the US for that kind of selection. Last but not least, improving the department. So we asked shoppers, what can you do to be better? What can we do to serve your needs better in the department? And variety really came out as the #1 reason. So again, a lot of opportunity for different kind of products to drive that curious consumer. Prices always floats to the top, but a lot of opportunity here to really connect better.
And I often would tell stores that a consumer, if you're out of stock on something, they don't think of you as being out of stock. They think of you as you don't have variety. You did not have what they wanted. So they don't even give you credit that you actually have the item, you're just out of stock. They kind of gig you for the fact that you don't have variety. So we really go back and try and use all this research to talk to our US retailers about what can they do. So the big takeaways are really connecting that idea that I mentioned earlier, that I write down what I want to buy, and then I have to connect that to say once they walk in the store, it really has to do with how the product looks. So we use the term the eyes decide. We have to grow the sales through higher buyer consumption frequency, and we talked about that, the whole idea of inspiring and expanding the knowledge to break the habit. Remember, we talked about consumers stay within the same group of items, but if you ask them, they would go further out if they had trial on it. Improve frequency through new consumption occasions, so that healthy snacking and other opportunities with cut fruit. Drives specific health and wellness messaging, and I talked about the holistic health and this whole idea of aligning with that. And educating with friendly, knowledgeable staff. The biggest issue with millennials, when you ask them about why they're not purchasing, they either don't know how to cook or how to prepare. So as US retailers are starting to put in produce butchers, what a great opportunity to have someone right on the sales floor that can answer the consumer's question about how to prepare product. We've talked about driving the higher basket value. So the idea is if they're going to buy the same amount of pounds, how do we get those dollars up? We talked about doing that through organic and value added. Clearly aligning with their social and cultural values, be transparent, inform them, talk about the sourcing, was it local? Food safety is paramount. Especially in the US, I think everyone that heard what happened to Chipotle and how they lost the value of their organization through a food safety issue, one of the things that supermarkets are really proud of is they do a great job on food safety. Be a produce destination. So the idea is that don't give your consumers a reason to go to a farmer's market. Don't give them a reason to go to an organic specialty store. Have that variety and have that product ready for them. And then steal some thunder from those alternative channels. So talk about your local sourcing. Have the produce butcher on the floor. Have local grower appearances and all of those things. And that wraps it up.
Yeah, so I saw a lot of people taking a lot of pictures. If you want a copy of this deck, shoot Rick or myself an email. We'll be happy to share it with you. This also goes hand in hand. In case you want some evening or weekend reading, it goes hand in hand with a thick report with a lot more information. So again, if you're interested in that, shoot Rick or myself an email.
Thank you so much.